Football Guys Talking Basketball, FGTB. Full disclosure, every other part of this episode was recorded before this part because we were like, hey, let's knock it out, except for where OU ends up in the bracket. And then we'll be able to talk about it and kind of break it down. Ted, they didn't make it.
Crazy.
The first team out.
It was the way we finished the season. It was like, oh my gosh, I did we open the door to not be able to make the tournament? You kind of had to watch some other teams, and some of those conference tournaments didn't go the way you wanted, but it felt like everyone was still saying that we're in. So I was pretty shocked.
They were essentially the next team in. They're the first one out. It's brutal for Porter Moser. Still has not taken Oklahoma to the tournament. I feel for Rivaldo Soares and Javion McCollum, Hughley, the guys that got injured, where if you got to imagine if this team was able to stay healthy, they would have been in for sure. I don't know how their current injury situation was factored in by the committee, but man, I don't know if they just didn't want to put 9 teams from the Big 12 in or what, but that sucks. It hurts.
Were they too confident that they were going to make it? Like, would you approach the TCU game differently?
I assume if those guys were healthy enough, they would have played.
Yeah.
Because
that's all we can do.
But that's a good question for Porter Moser. Hey, could a couple of those guys gone in that game? But I do think they thought they had done enough. I mean, all the bracketology guys thought they had done enough.
Yeah. Man, that's frustrating for that group. You know, we've seen way too much of this recently for Oklahoma, whether it's football, whether it's basketball. When you play just barely like on the line and you leave everything open to in this instance, you leave it up to a committee or you leave it up to one call by an official on the field. Like, we have not given ourselves very much room to operate. Everything has just been right there on the line lately, and we've gotten the bad end of it a lot recently.
They had no bad losses.
No, all quad one.
18-6. I believe I saw what they were 18-6 when they had all of their guys. After they started getting banged up, they didn't finish the season strong.
Yeah.
I mean, they left the door open to being left out. And you mentioned it, just a couple of the conference tournaments. It's like everything that had to have happened. It was like the Murphy's Law situation for OU not making the tournament. Like everything that could go wrong for them not to get in went wrong for them.
I was watching that NC State North Carolina game last night. Like, oh my God, this is not a good result for Oklahoma, right? And I'm sure there was plenty of other things that went down, but here's it sucks. I hate it. I'm frustrated. I feel like they were a good enough team to get in. I felt all along that once they got out of conference and got into, seeing some new teams, that they were going to be dangerous. Obviously needed to get healthy too. But I mean, the fact of the matter is they didn't win enough games late, and they played some really bad basketball at times, like really bad. I mean, it's one thing to lose some of those games, but it's another thing to lose some of those games and shoot like 30% from the field and hardly score any points. I mean, it doesn't make a big impression on people.
I was, you're right. You're right. They weren't exactly blowing us away down the stretch in conference play, but maybe I just thought they'd get too much benefit of the doubt with the injuries.
Yeah.
But I kind of was just looking at all the bracketology stuff, and everyone still had him in. I think Lenardi before the selection show had them as their last team, his last team in, but they end up being the first team out. I think a lot of people are confused. Like Virginia made it, but ultimately, no excuses, right? You have no one to blame but yourself. If you're Porter Moser and his team, you cannot leave it in the hands of the committee. You just can't. You got to finish stronger than they did. But man, I feel so bad for that group because to have the start to the season that they had and then to go through the ups and downs of conference play, but to feel like they still were going to have a chance, maybe it'd all come together. Brutal, dude. Absolutely brutal.
Yeah. It's wild. What does this mean anything? Because I know there was conversation about the DePaul stuff, and
I think
then that
DePaul filled the opening. So
they did, and I know that that's all been put behind us. But there was quite a few people that were saying before any of that that Porter Moser would be in serious trouble if they didn't make the tournament this year. Do you feel like that's the case, or?
I certainly think there'll be a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that 3 years in a row.
It's tough. Yeah.
So now
And I'm
what?
sure like it's going to be hard to hang on to players now. It's
Well, the interesting thing is what does we talk about what the move to the SEC does for football all the time, but like what does that do for Porter Moser and for basketball? I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, a brutal selection Sunday. I was worried, I was flipping back and forth between the players, watching Wyndham Clark lip out to force the playoff. What a you talk about brutal endings. But I was just hoping they weren't in the East region because I was flipping back and forth watching the golf, hoping going, oh, I don't want to miss their tile flipping over because it's an exciting moment. And it just never came. Oh,
yeah, brutal. It's
what are we gonna
absolutely
do for
brutal.
March Madness now? That's the worst part is we don't no, no one feels worse than the players and the coaches. I understand that, but 3 years in a row, we don't get the excitement of at least being able to irrationally advance our team too far in our bracket or fill it out. I miss that
Yeah.
feeling.
Well, that's one of the things that's frustrating is no matter what, like people feel frustrated about this season, and I totally get it. But if you just make it into the tournament, you eliminate a whole bunch of like what went down throughout the season, and everyone's ultimately going to remember the postseason that you made it, and who knows, maybe you go on a run or something, have some excitement. Like if you just get in, a lot of the frustration that happened to get there is like it's all flushed right away. It's like new season, right here, off we go, and unfortunately, when you don't make it, it inflames all of those things.
No doubt. I guess, and this is something we talk about later in the episode that we've already recorded. I guess the only thing that makes you feel better is OU baseball completed the sweep against TCU. 6-0 to start conference play.
Hey, number one in the league. That's something to hang your hat on right now.